Watching the UK tonight, it's 8 o'clock coming up. The US and Israel hit Iran for a third day. Dramatic video shows 3 US jets mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defences. And now the UK is drawn into this conflict. RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus hit by a drone, just hours after the Prime Minister said British bases could be used to attack Iran. The Foreign Office is tonight scrambling to help 300,000 Britons trapped in the Gulf as war rages around them. And the consequences will be felt here in the UK too. Ships at a standstill in the Strait of Hormuz, and oil and gas prices are spiking. All that's come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Well, good evening. We're focusing on the Middle East tonight. More than 600 people are dead, and President Donald Trump has refused to rule out the possibility of invading Iran. In an interview with the New York Post, President Trump said, "I don't have the yips with respect to boots on the ground," before adding that he probably didn't need them. Well, the US military claims to have hit 1,000 targets in Iran on the first day of strikes, and they are continuing to carry out what the White House called large-scale combat operations. Iran has struck back right across the region, launching drone and missile attacks on the Gulf states, targeting oil and gas facilities and US military bases, as well as the RAF base in Cyprus. Adam Parsons has the latest from Jerusalem.
Iran is being pounded, attacked for a third day. The military might of the United States focused upon degrading the country that it portrays as the nexus of evil in the Middle East. On the ground, there is widespread destruction. The Iranian authorities say hundreds have been killed. But America's leaders are wholly unapologetic. They are bullish, and they show no appetite for stopping.
We continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
Iran insists that it is the innocent party here, that the war against it is unjust and illegal.
The ongoing unlawful military aggression against Iran exemplifies the dominance of raw power over the principles of human rights.
Iran has responded with attacks of its own. This a strike on the Israeli town of Beersheva. Israel's air defense have coped with almost everything, but not all missiles can be stopped. The country is still shaken by the attack that killed 9 when a missile hit a bunker in Beit Shemesh. Today, the Prime Minister visited the site.
When I stand here in a place that was bombarded by the terrorists in Tehran against innocent civilians, you see the difference. The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians.
Well, that smoke trail up there is what's left of the Israeli air defense system intercepting an Iranian missile, part of a wave that is coming into Israel as we speak. But it isn't just this country that is being attacked. Iran's tactic is to try to embroil this whole region into a conflict. And the Middle East is in a febrile state. Israel has launched a huge assault on Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah, a group funded by Iran which attacked northern Israel this morning. In Cyprus, the UK's Akrotiri air base was hit by a drone attack. In Kuwait, 3 American fighter jets were shot down accidentally by Kuwaiti air defences. The crew all ejected safely. The conflict has touched Saudi Arabia for the first time, debris sparking a fire next to a giant oil refinery. The price of oil is already going up, and now Qatar has said it will halt production of natural gas. The country has also said it shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets, Russian-made Su-24s. Iran has launched attacks in Bahrain, in Dubai, and in Abu Dhabi. there are interceptions of missiles in the sky over Jordan. This is a conflict that is widening and which may escalate. Donald Trump says it will last at least 4 weeks, but the effects of this war may ripple for generations to come. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's get more on the latest developments and those strikes on Lebanon. Diana Magnay is in Jerusalem for us tonight with the latest. So bring us up to date, Diana, with what's going on.
Well, I think it is a very significant development that now for Israel this is a war on two fronts, and it was prompted by overnight missile attacks into northern Israel from Hezbollah, not particularly serious ones, in that nobody was killed, nobody was injured. One of them just landed in the middle of a field. But Israel has responded extremely forcefully, and it says that it is ready to go on the offensive, that this may be a prolonged period of conflict, possibly an invasion. They've told people in 53 villages in the south of Lebanon to evacuate. A lot of those people have tried to come up to Beirut, to the southern suburbs, which are Hezbollah controlled, where they've again met airstrikes. A huge airstrike that we saw in southern Beirut earlier today. And Israel has taken out the head of intelligence for Hezbollah, also the head of the military wing of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, based in Lebanon too. So I think we've seen a significant new front opening up there, something that Israel was preparing for a long time. I mean, there is nominally a ceasefire, or there was, but there have been airstrikes continually, which have picked up in February ahead of the operation against Iran, or an anticipated operation. And clearly for Israel, they feel that if they are going to dismantle the regime in Iran, they also want to dismantle Iran's proxies, of which for the Israelis, Hezbollah as well as Hamas are the two others that are most significant for them.
Diana, thank you. Diana Magnay with the latest there from Jerusalem. Now, we've heard quite a lot from the United States today. President Trump has been talking, as has the US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has revealed what he really thinks about the UK and the special relationship.
Capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force.
Well, it was quite an extraordinary statement from the Defence Secretary. We're joined now by US correspondent Mark Stone in Washington to talk about that in a bit more detail, Mark, because it was quite startling, a real insight into how America is viewing the UK's involvement, or lack thereof, in this conflict so far. The US Defence Secretary also talking about stupid rules of engagement of the past.
Yeah, in just about 1 minute, one chunk of a very long statement, he revealed an awful lot. First of all, he publicly articulated the deep frustration, or actually maybe is it anger, that the Americans have with the British, and indeed with the French and the Germans, but mostly, and a couple of other European countries, but mostly the British, because of the presence of bases in the UK that the US wanted access to. He's publicly articulated this anger, a private discussion, a private disagreement that has been going on for quite a few weeks. I mean, remember, it's been a while that we have been talking about the prospect of America taking action in Iran. That armada has been floating and basically surrounding Iran for quite some time. And behind the scenes, clearly, the Americans have been talking to their allies about the degree to which they would be alongside America for this operation. And it has become clear over the past few weeks that the British had real reservations, to the extent that Keir Starmer blocked the use of UK bases like Fairford and the base in the Indian Ocean as well. Diego Garcia blocked the use of those bases because the British position is that the initial action by the Americans was contrary to international law, and that has caused a massive rift. And then, as you say, that second part, which you didn't play, which I think is remarkable, no stupid rules of engagement. That is the US Defense Secretary basically upending what we have thought was should be what Western democracies, the kind of cornerstone of Western democracies, that they fight wars taking into account rules of engagement, taking into account international law, and it is the enemies who defy all those. Now he appears to be saying, we don't care about the rules of engagement. And I wonder whether that actually makes Keir Starmer's argument for not taking part in the initial action just that little bit easier, because he can now say, if he wants to, look, the Americans are admitting it up front. They don't care about the rules of engagement. We do. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, was unable and unwilling to authorise the use of military bases. I think that's probably the argument he will articulate.
Mark, thank you. Let's bring in John Craig, who's standing by in Westminster. And John, you heard there the criticism of the UK by the US Defence Secretary, the Prime Minister criticised by the United States. And a little closer to home as well, because the UK is now getting involved. The big question is, to what extent?
Well, the extent is that the British Prime Minister, both in a TV broadcast last night and again in the House of Commons, is talking about defensive action, defending British interests, rather than offensive action. Now, he faced MPs for nearly 2 hours in the House of Commons this afternoon. A large part of that was taking questions from opposition MPs and indeed some of his more sceptical backbenchers, the ones we normally call the usual suspects. Now, the argument that Mark was just talking about is one that many Labour MPs would agree with, and in quite an approving way. I've just been to a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party that followed the session in the House of Commons, in the Commons chamber, and he got a pretty good reception there, because Labour MPs believe that sticking to the international rules is actually the right thing to do, and that they are no great fans of President Trump, and that they think he doesn't care two hoots about international law, and they think that if Sir Keir is backing international law, treaties, obligations and so on, that is the right thing to do. So the Prime Minister has won some plaudits. He got criticism from his own side, apart from those who say that the Americans' action is illegal, but the opposition, of course, saying he should have backed President Trump much earlier.
John, thank you. John Craig there with the latest from Westminster. Well, let's stay with that now. The Prime Minister changing his mind about allowing the United States to launch some attacks on Iran from British bases. Our Security and Defence editor Deborah Haynes reports now on the UK's contribution to this war.
Fighter jets at a British base in Cyprus scramble as a siren sounds the alarm. RAF Akrotiri is on alert after a suspected Iranian drone hit the runway on Sunday night, marking a new front line in the US war with Iran. The threat for the UK may well grow, with the Prime Minister saying American warplanes can now use British bases to launch strikes against the regime, but only to target its ballistic missile capabilities.
We are not joining the strikes, but we will continue our defensive actions in the region. France and Germany are also prepared to enable US action to destroy Iran's capability to fire missiles and drones from source.
Iran can still inflict harm in a number of ways, despite waves of US and Israeli airstrikes. Most potent are its arsenal of ballistic missiles, which are thought to have a range of up to around 1,200 miles, enough to threaten targets across the Middle East, but not to be able to hit the UK mainland. The Iranians are also armed with cruise missiles and a large volume of explosive drones. In addition, they have sophisticated cyber weapons, with the UK on Monday warning the public to be on alert for Iranian cyber attacks. Then there's the Iranian terror threat. This could include lone attackers using bombs to hit ships, troops or bases. And what about the possible British targets? The UK has thousands of service personnel across the Middle East and in Cyprus. RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus has the largest concentration of forces, as well as F-35 fighter jets. Dakhiliyah is another sovereign base here, run by the army. Over in Qatar, the UK uses the US's Al Udeid Air Base for operations, a squadron of Typhoon jets deployed here as tensions between the US and Iran escalated. There's a naval support facility in Bahrain, but without any warships. Oman hosts a logistics base, and there's a small UK footprint at a larger American facility in Dubai. Finally, Britain has a slim scattering of troops in Kuwait, Iraq, Israel, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. While the UK says it's not yet defending itself by launching strikes against Iran directly, this decision may have to change as the conflict escalates. And that raises questions about what the military could do after decades of defence cuts. Warplanes could bomb missile launchers, but there doesn't appear to be a submarine armed with bigger weapons in the region. As for air defences, the only piece of British kit that can shoot down incoming ballistic missiles is the Type 45 destroyer. 3 out of 6 of these warships are said to be operational, but none are thought to be deployed in the area. Instead, the US is providing the most effective shield. But if that wavers, the UK has very little in reserve. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in now retired General and former Commander of the UK Joint Forces Command, General Sir Richard Barrons. Really good to see you this evening. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about what's been developing over the last few days in the Middle East. The UK has been drawn into this from a defensive point of view, we understand, from the Prime Minister. What do you make of that particular development this evening?
So I think that's logical and necessary. As Deborah has described, there are British bases in the region with not just service persons, but also their families, in the case of Cyprus, and perhaps around 400,000 British citizens in the Middle East, in places that Iran has elected to attack. So I think it would be disappointing if our government wasn't taking steps to protect citizens and British forces in the region with what is clearly a defensive action.
Yeah, defensive. But how do you see this developing? The UK in it now to a lesser extent than the United States and Israel. Can you see this escalating from a UK point of view in their involvement?
I think it's generally unlikely, not least because of the limitations of British forces in the region. The number of combat aircraft that are based particularly in Cyprus and Qatar, they're fully focused on trying to shoot down incoming Iranian cruise missiles and drones. And we should remember that none of them can shoot down a ballistic missile. And if you look at the scale of the American effort in Iran, supplemented by a big contribution from Israel, it's really hard to see what the point would be of British forces joining in other than symbolism. But we're going to come back to this point that in the view of our government, this action in Iran did not pass the test of international humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict. And that doesn't seem to bother the US or Israel, and it does bother our government. Yeah,
actually, I'd be really interested to get your point of view on what was said by the US Defence Secretary earlier today. I'm sure you've heard some of it. In a statement, he gave us an insight into how America was viewing the UK's hands-off approach for reasons of legality that you've just talked about there. He talked about old allies clutching their pearls, hemming and hawing. And he went on to say that they were not operating by stupid rules of engagement. In those few words, he's dismantled quite a lot of the special relationship there. And indeed, as you said, international laws and norms.
So I think it certainly illustrates a very different point of view from what is actually a European view. And from a US perspective, maybe we shouldn't be too surprised, because for the last 18 months at least, the United States has essentially been saying that big powers like the US will do what they feel they must do, unencumbered by some of the constraints of the past, particularly where they feel their national security is genuinely in jeopardy. And the European view, including the UK, has been more measured than that, and wants to take action in accordance with international law and the laws of armed conflict, even if that makes some military actions really difficult. And these views are quite difficult to reconcile right now.
Could Iran attack the UK? Is that a conceivable possibility? Because that is the question that a lot of people watching this interview tonight at home, watching what's going on, will be thinking and worrying about potentially.
So on the one hand, people should be really clear that Iran does not have missiles in Iran that can get anywhere close to the UK. But Iran has had long-running antipathy with the UK and will hold the UK, whatever we say, to some degree accountable for what's happening now. And the way Iran can hurt the UK is, first of all, by cyber attack. It has quite a sophisticated capability. And then, as Deborah described, the thing we don't really know is are there Iranian supporters in UK capable and willing and ready to commit acts of terrorism? I'm sure the security service have got their eyes fully on this, but that's a bit of an unknown factor.
I really appreciate the benefit of your expertise this evening. General Sir Richard Barrons, there, former commander of Joint Forces Command. Thank you so much for your time. So to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll have analysis on what the war could mean for the UK economy. This is as oil and gas prices surge because of the conflict. And I'll speak to the son of a British couple jailed in Iran as concerns grow for their safety.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
There are around 300,000 British people caught up in the conflict. That includes expats who've made their lives in cities like Dubai, tourists seeking winter sunshine, and travellers who were simply unlucky enough to be connecting at Gulf airports when this war started. Sally Lockwood has the latest from Dubai.
There is still a sense of unreality to these scenes, but they're no longer unexpected in the UAE. Day 3 of this war beginning with an explosion in the northern emirate of Ras Al Khaimah, a residential area next to luxury hotels clouded in smoke. Around the same time came loud bangs of air defences over Dubai's skyline. Meanwhile, sunbathers on the ground are getting a front row seat of incoming fire. Some here feel more relaxed than others.
It's a little bit like watching the stock exchange, to be fair. Some minutes it's fine and people are jubilant, and other minutes it's quite serious quite quickly.
On the first night when we had to go and shelter in the basement of the hotel, I think that was quite alarming. And we all woke up this morning to a very, very loud bang. We sort of jumped out of bed. So there have been moments when it's, you know, the anxiety's been quite high.
Emma and Hermione were due to fly out this morning and still have no idea when they're going to get home.
I think you'd agree that we haven't had much information at all from the embassy or the airline, so we feel a bit stuck and we don't know what's going on.
The first few flights are now beginning to depart the UAE. Tens of thousands of Britons have registered their presence here with the British Embassy, who are warning not to travel to airports unless advised to do so. It's unclear if diplomacy has been working as hard as the air defence systems to slow the attacks here.
There's been a few hours of calm tonight after 3 unnerving days here, but the threat hasn't disappeared. More than 700 missiles and drones have been fired at the UAE, and despite world-class air defences, around 35 drones made it through. And that's what worries analysts, the risk that this could become a prolonged numbers game where drones are used to stretch even the most advanced air defences.
We don't yet know how the UAE will respond to these attacks on its peace and security, but we have a glimpse of normality returning tonight, and tourists can tentatively plan returning home. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, Dubai.
Well, I'm joined now by Enrique Cornejo, Energy Policy Director of Offshore Energies UK, the leading trade body for the UK's offshore energies industry. And we're going to talk about the impact on oil and gas after what's started unfolding over in the Middle East in recent days. And in particular, we've just heard that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, which is that thin strip of water there you can see between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar. Explain to us why that's so important, Enrique.
Of course. Yeah, the first thing to say, obviously, you know, we're concerned about all the civilians impacted by these developments across the Middle East and hundreds of thousands of Brits in the region. These key choke point for flows of oil and gas globally. So about 20% of oil and gas flow through this area, connecting supply and demand. So at the moment, we're not seeing any of those flows reach the customers, and that will definitely have impacts on the global energy market.
Yeah. Iran has said that it will fire on any ship that tries to pass through the strait. It is a major shipping route for Gulf oil. And we have seen oil and gas prices fluctuate in recent days since this war broke out. If, as President Trump says, this continues for 4 or 5 weeks, is that something that the industry can weather? Is it if it goes into months that we could see real problems and a ripple effect here in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what these developments show now is that domestic oil and gas production in the UK is absolutely critical for energy security and for national security as well. And as you know, in the UK, we have domestic oil and gas production, we have a mature basin, but we still have significant amounts of oil and gas that we can produce domestically with a lower carbon footprint compared to imports, particularly coming from liquefied natural gas. Our carbon footprint of domestic gas production in the UK is about a third than the imported alternative. And also domestic oil and gas pays taxes in the UK, sustains over 200,000 jobs across the industry. So we can sustain production in the UK alongside developing renewables. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, this whole approach of producing homegrown energy, of oil and gas in tandem with renewables is a solution instead of the division of oil and gas against renewables. However, at the moment in the UK, we've had successive governments having detrimental policies for domestic oil and gas production in the UK, and that is making us be more reliant on imports. And as you can see,
we moved away from Russia to Qatar, and the reliance on Qatari oil is due to go up by up to 20%, I think it is, by 2030, and that's a real concern.
Absolutely, and domestic supply at the moment gives us about 43% of the gas that we use and we need. And many of your viewers at home will have their gas boiler running at the moment. Our industries run on gas as well. Oil markets in the UK and Europe are heavily interconnected. So there are two different outcomes here, especially when you look at what can happen in the next 10 years in the UK. We can sustain domestic oil and gas production and then make sure that we reduce this reliance on imports and also, reduce the geopolitical risk associated with having an increased reliance on imports. And we can sustain the production levels we have today for the next 10 years. And that would mean that in the case of gas, in the next 10 years, we could see reliance on LNG being single digits. However, if we do not have an investable fiscal regime for oil and gas, we could end up in a very different situation. And in the next 10 years, imports of LNG could be about 40% of what we need. So I think in this country, we have a very clear choice. We either support our homegrown energy and follow the principle that our neighbors across the North Sea in Norway are following, that, again, they are making the choice to produce their domestic energy and then export it to the UK. And last year in the UK, we didn't see a single exploration well drilled because the basin does not have investable conditions. And in Norway, we saw the government award over 50 licenses for oil and gas, a lot of which will end up here in the UK. So we have a choice here. The government has a choice to shield us from this risked approach of having an increased reliance on imports, support our homegrown energy, or be subject to these developments.
OK, well, it takes a war, doesn't it, to put energy security to sort of the top of the agenda to get us talking about it once again. Really appreciate your insight tonight. Enrique Cornejo, Energy Policy Director at Offshore Energies UK. Thank you. I'm sure we'll talk over the coming days and weeks. Right, still to come here on the UK tonight. I'm going to speak to the son of a couple jailed in Iran who says that he is incredibly worried for their safety.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on. Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh? Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
there's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
The only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The family of a British couple detained in Iran are growing concerned over their safety amid Israeli and US strikes on the country. Craig and Lizzie Foreman were detained over a year ago and last month jailed for 10 years on espionage charges, which they deny. Lizzie's son Joe Bennett has been campaigning for their release and is now urging the Prime Minister and President Trump to act urgently on their behalf. And Joe joins us now. Joe, really good of you to come on to talk to us about your parents this evening. Have you heard from them since these strikes began?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I have. We heard from them this morning and this afternoon. As you say, deeply concerned and worried. I mean, when I was on the phone to my mum this morning, these bombs are close enough going off to the prison that they heard them, they felt them. One was so close that it blew out the windows. And yeah, there was mass panic on the other end of the phone. It's, whatever people think about the geopolitics, it's now about immediate human safety, to be completely honest.
And what did your mum say about what they're being told in prison about what's happening?
So the information they get given is very limited. The one news channel that they do have is very biased towards the regime, and I don't think they get a clear picture. We try to give them as much information as we can this side to make an assessed decision. But ultimately, again, they feel as though they've kind of been left to their own devices. The UK embassy are not in the country anymore. They haven't provided a contingency plan for them. And as I say, they're kind of left to make up plans and arrangements on their own, which, in a country that's completely foreign to them, must be very difficult.
Yeah, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has previously called Craig and Lindsay's sentence completely appalling and totally unjustifiable, and vowed that the government would pursue this case relentlessly with the Iranian government until we see them safely returned. In light of what's happening, do you feel that actually Craig and Lindsay have been falling down the list of priorities in terms of there is now a war in the region?
I mean, if I'm being completely honest, unfortunately, yes. I think, it's really sad state of affairs to see that it's got to this stage. We were really hoping that, the peace talks would be peaceful and that there could be a peaceful resolution for everybody involved. I've never believed that war's the answer. I don't think it is. Innocent people die and innocent people are at danger, and that's never the answer in my eyes. But, I'm not going to get drawn into party politics or military decisions. I can tell you what it means for us as a British family. We're beyond worried. I mean, I'm desperate. You try to act composed, but when you hear your mum, describe an explosion from inside a prison, it hits you that they're trapped, they can't run, they can't protect themselves. And my only focus is getting them both home safely.
I'm sure they try to be brave for you in terms of that's extremely difficult. At the end of the day, they're your parents and they want to shield you from the worst of what's going on. But did you get a sense of how frightened they were? Because it's one thing being in a notorious prison in Tehran, it's another to have it bombarded and in an area that's a target.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think over the course of the last three months since we've had these phone calls, they have definitely shielded us as a family. There's been a bit of a mask. It doesn't always stay true. You've heard some desperation. I've heard my mum at absolute rock bottom. But as I say, today's call, when the bombs were going off, it was a pure state of panic. There was, a loss of the control that she had. And that ultimately was one of the hardest things, bar everything else that I've heard, to have to experience, because I felt absolutely helpless. There was nothing I could do or say to calm her down or to reassure her that things were going to be okay. And that is the hardest thing, is that I don't know if they are going to be okay, which is really, really hard to go through.
And you speak to your mum, is it every week you're allowed a phone call?
So to be honest, since the hunger strike that they did in November, it is pretty much daily. There may be an odd day here or there where she can't call, but it has been, as I say, pretty much daily, and normally twice a day as well, which we are ever so grateful for. Even through the recent protests and the blackouts, communication, although not great, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like a phone call you can make in the UK. It's very, very intermittent, it's sporadic. It's a bad line, it hangs up all the time, but we're still grateful that we can speak to one another. And that has given us a sense of comfort. It's a daily reminder of their struggles, but, you know, we're ever so grateful because I couldn't speak to my mum for 8 months. So to be able to speak to her, you know, almost daily is a massive, massive boost. But as I say, it is just reminds you every day of how unjust the situation is.
Yeah. And since this conflict broke out over the weekend, have you had any contact from any representative from the government, any consular support about your parents?
I mean, what they say is that they provide consular assistance remotely. I don't quite understand how that works. You know, they can't see them, they can't give them their welfare items. It doesn't look like they'll be able to top up money for their cars for them to be able to buy things. That shop is not going to be restocked when the country's at war. So there's a lot of things that can't be done whilst the government aren't in the country. So, you know, they haven't had a welfare visit for over 3 months now. So they say that they're providing it, and we're not seeing the evidence of it being provided. So, yeah, I mean, at this moment, I don't think that they are being provided with consular or welfare access or assistance, to be completely truthful.
It must feel like it's all on your shoulders at the moment, Joe, in terms of, you know, fighting against their sentence, trying to secure their release and bring them home, and also being their daily point of contact, trying to keep their spirits up. How are you doing, and what can people who are watching our conversation do to help your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unbearable weight. You know, it is tough. You kind of, and it's not just me; it's the family as well that have to deal with it. You know, it is a unimaginable weight, and it's like almost a grief that you're experiencing every day. As you say, it is hard to shoulder those calls. I mean, it's not just me who shoulders them. There are other members of the family they get to speak to, but I'd say the majority of calls from my mum, at least, come through to me. It's bittersweet. I would never not want her to call, but it is, as I say, because you feel so powerless and helpless, and you can't do anything for their immediate situation. As we are doing as much as we can this end, but the big difference is for what's going on for them out there, and we can have no part in that. That's very difficult. In terms of the public support has been amazing. You know, we've had tens of thousands of signatures on the petition. There's been a GoFundMe page which has been incredible at supporting the family to get us through this difficult time. So it is that continued support, and you know, we're also getting the support of parliamentarians, and we're just hoping that if we keep on pushing and we keep on, you know, keeping the pressure up, that ultimately it will make a difference.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight. Joe Bennett there, son of Craig and Lindsay Foreman. The British couple detained in Iran, sentenced to 10 years on spying charges they have always denied. Thank you so much, Joe.
No problem.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by British-Iranian campaigner for women's rights, Layla Jazayeri. Layla, really good to see you this evening. Thank you so much for coming in. Throughout the course of this hour, we have covered a lot. There is a lot going on in the Middle East, and particularly centring around Iran. How difficult has that been to watch from here in the UK? What's going on?
It's sad. The fact that Khamenei is eliminated, it's the end of an era. That means the end of religious tyranny, and for the Iranian people to reclaim their sovereignty. But then, in any war, like any war is not pleasant. In war, people suffer, especially Iranian people living under a ruthless regime that for decades have spent the national wealth of Iranian people on export of terrorism, on proxy wars, on nuclear program, on developing their missiles program, on repression, instead of people's welfare. I mean, these policies of the regime has led to where we are now. The current crisis is the consequence of those policies which Iranian resistance warned the West decades ago.
Do you think you're moving from one crisis to another? You know, over the weekend, I was looking at scenes on Sky News of British Iranians and Iranian nationals dancing on the streets of North London. the Supreme Leader was dead, they felt like this was the start of change. But the big question for so many people, even at this early stages, just days into this conflict, is what next? And, you know, what's been happening in Iran, what you've described there, has been going on for nearly 50 years. It's woven into the DNA of your country, and that will be difficult to unpick and overcome. Just because the Supreme Leader has been targeted and killed, it doesn't mean that change is miraculously going to happen for Iran. So how are you feeling about going forward from here?
Well, it has made it easier for the people to topple the regime. It has, because the Supreme Leader had all the power in hands. But in fact, to bring down the totality of the regime, you need to dismantle the IRGC, the killing the machine of killing, this machinery of killing and torture and repression, piece by piece. And I don't believe military bombardment, any amount of military intervention could do that unless you have boots on the ground. So that is, as the Iranian resistance and its leadership, Maryam Rajavi, has said over and over, that is the sole responsibility of the Iranian people and their organized resistance movement. You see, as the war is going on, there is a network of resistance units affiliated to this resistance. They are clashing and confronting the IRGC, the basis of security forces. They are disarming them, they are retaliating. So what the West could do is to empower them, to recognize their rights, to stand up to them by all means. That is the way forward.
Leila, I'm just going to take a pause there because Secretary of State in Washington, Marco Rubio, is speaking. Let's just listen in. He's speaking in Washington. Here he is.
It's all about. That's what it's focused on. As the President said earlier today, it is on or ahead of schedule. I will defer to the Department of War to discuss the progress being made at a tactical level, but it was the right decision and an important decision for the safety and security of the world.
Does Congress have to weigh in? Does Congress have to weigh in? Is the President declaring war, and does Congress have to weigh in? And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent threat?
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Because of an impending Israeli action?
No, let me two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran in about a year or a year and a half would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weakened Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
Secretary, President Trump said overnight that his top choices to now run Iran were killed in the strikes. Does the United States have a firm plan for how they intend to handle this power vacuum in Iran to ensure that an Iranian hardliner does not take power?
So two things, and two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's our objective. That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
Secretary, so are you saying, based on that, are you saying that there is no responsibility, no plan for the U.S. to at least play a role in whatever government comes next?
We might. We'll see how circumstances play out. But I'm telling you what the objectives of this operation are. The objectives of this operation are to destroy their ballistic missile capability and make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program. That's the objective of the mission. That said, abundantly clear, we would love for there to be an Iran that's not governed by radical Shia clerics. As I've said myself repeatedly for years, the leadership of that country does not reflect the people of Iran, and I think that's been pretty apparent in the protests that you've seen. If there's something we can do to help them down the road, we'd obviously be open to it, but that's not the objective. The objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capability.
Regime change has not gone well for the United States.
The what now?
Regime change has not gone well for the United States for many, many decades. How do you assure the American public that things will not get worse for the next regime that comes in there and replaces the
we would love to see this regime be replaced. And ultimately, as the president has said, he calls... No, but let me finish my answer. As the president has said, he would love for the people of Iran to use this as an opportunity to rise up and remove these leaders. They've been wanting to remove them from a long time. We've seen successive waves of protests, and we've seen them slaughter people, okay? But the objective of this mission is to make sure they don't have these weapons that can threaten us and our allies in the region. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. And while we would love to see a new regime, the bottom line is no matter who governs that country a year from now, they're not going to have these ballistic missiles and they're not going to have these drones to threaten us. That's the objective of this mission, is to deny them the ability to use ballistic missiles to threaten their neighbors, to threaten our bases, to threaten our presence in the region, and ultimately as a shield behind which they can do whatever they want with their nuclear weapons ambition. We were not going to let them hide behind that, and that's why this was such a critical mission to undertake now while they were at their weakest point, and not a year from now where they could inflict even more damage and perhaps already be behind that point of immunity. Go right here behind. Go ahead, you and then you. Yes.
Your critics in Congress have said that they should have a role, they should be able to weigh in here, and there are going to be war powers resolutions votes in Congress later this week. Why not notify Congress ahead of this, and does Congress...
Well, we did. We notified Congress. I mean, we notified the Gang of Eight. We notified congressional leadership. There's no law that requires us to do that. The law says we have to notify them 48 hours after beginning hostilities. We've done that. I think the notification went today. But we did notify members of Congress in advance. But we can't notify 535 members of Congress. And, well, the Congress can vote on whatever they want, but there's no law that requires us to do that. And I want to say something, because I see people on TV. Look, that's fine. If they want to take a war powers vote, they can do that. They've done that. They've done that a bunch of times. But there's no, people keep saying that there's no law that requires the president to have done anything with regards to this. To begin with, no presidential administration has ever accepted the War Powers Act as constitutional. Not Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. That said, we have followed the notification at 48 hours. We're here today. I've done more Gang of Eight briefings than I got in the 4 years that Biden was president and I was a member of the Gang of Eight. All of that said, we've complied with the law 100%. And we're going to continue to comply with it. We've done the notification, and we officially to Congress, but we did notify members of Congress. We just can't notify 535 people. That's not possible, but we did the Gang of Eight twice. I briefed them last week, and then I called them the night before the operation.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio there answering questions, very much reiterating what the US Defence Secretary said earlier on today, that the US ambition here is to destroy Iran's missile threat, destroy their navy and their nuclear capability. When questioned on regime change, he said that the US would love to see this regime be replaced, but that was very much in the hands of the Iranian people as it stands. We'll continue to follow what is said in Washington and bring you further updates in the world that follows us here with Yalda at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, Neil's here in the studio because he's got a shiny new podcast. What a day to launch a podcast called This Is Why.
Yeah, and obviously...
Talk about timing.
Yeah, we're focusing on Scotland's chances in the World Cup. No, strangely enough, there is only one story in town. Look, let me try and explain the conceit, because obviously we've been doing podcasting here at Sky for a while, and I've been the host of The Daily. Now, over the course of the time that we've done it, something's become a bit clear. There is an awful lot of information being chucked at every one of us these days from a variety of sources, obviously not just Sky, but the context often is lost in the mass of information that's being thrown at you. So what we're going to be doing on this particular podcast is taking one topic a day. Today we've examined just how intertwined the UK is with the US when it comes to Iran, tell you what has been going on, but then just take a step back, have a breath, and let our team of experts, correspondents all around the world explain, first and foremost, why you should be bothered by the story, but secondly, why it matters, why it's happening, and why we should all be focusing on it a little bit more.
Yeah, so obviously today's first episode is, you know, the UK's involvement. The UK's been brought into this conflict in the Middle East. Whether that will escalate remains to be seen. So who have you had on the podcast today, this first one, and what's been said?
Yeah, it's we've got Deborah Haynes and Dominic Waghorn both on the programme. In essence, again, both of them have been covering this sort of stuff for an absolute age. Same as me. I've done 20+ years in the news here at Sky. There can't have been a question that I or one of us, one of the team, have not asked at some point. I suppose the problem is when it comes to something like this, for example, the UK's involvement in a far-off war, a war in which actually we thought originally we weren't going to be getting involved with, you know, not many people can predict with any degree of accuracy what is coming, you know, in 24 hours, let alone in 2 weeks' time. It is a fun little podcast to do. We've been trialling it, rehearsing it. First one is out today. Plan is to have them kind of appearing in your feeds around about 4 o'clock. If you do not subscribe, do that now.
It's still going to be daily, is it?
It is indeed. Every day, yeah. I have weekends off. You know, I mean, look at me. It's knitwear and news.
News doesn't stop, Neil. Neither should you.
Well, I try to, occasionally, just occasionally. Yeah, and if you subscribe, that will be there for your commute home. And 15 minutes after starting that podcast, you are going to be a lot more informed. Do you want to have a quick look?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Why has the Prime Minister done what he said he was not going to do? Is it just because he didn't have another choice?
Well, he's not really thrown his hat in the ring, has he?
No.
He's kind of like got his hat out and he's sort of like, you know, waving it near the ring. Because I think throwing it into the ring will be when if the UK actually launches a strike against Iran, and that hasn't happened yet. So I think for now he is still dancing this strange dance of needing to look like he's defending British assets, but not wanting to go all-out offensive against Iran.
Finally, if you want to get involved with this, Sarah-Jane, why at sky.uk. You can send us your ideas for stories, your ideas for profiles. If there's a phrase in the news you don't understand, let us know. We'll explain it.
It's one of the key questions of journalism, isn't it? Why? And it's often, as you said, what everyone watching our interviews wants to know, the context and the story behind it, as well as what's actually going on that day. Right, Neil, brilliant. That's my drive home sorted. Thank you very much. Right, we are going to stay with events in the Middle East. Yalda Hakim is coming up next with The World. She is live in Jerusalem following events. We'll have reaction to what has been coming out of the United States with regard to their involvement of lots of official speakers.